Yeah, so I'm really, really bummed that World Youth Day happens to be this week that you're teaching for us, that I can't sit in on this course. So can you give me a preview? You're starting tonight. We have, I think, 100 students almost coming to this course. Tell me where you're going to take them. What do they have in store over the next few days?
Well, the chapters, the first chapters in the book that Father Tom and I wrote are about being one-on-one, focusing on interiority, which requires vulnerability, and then needs to be fostered through a listening that can really create a space of trust, and then can open up to communication. So that's sort of the little bit of the arc there. And then to take it in from John Paul's language, what really has moved me is, so original solitude, of course, that we were created in, and is our subjectivity, is really related to all of that interiority, what's going on inside of us.
Let's talk about these three words just for our viewers. Original solitude, interiority, subjectivity. These are not words we use every day, but once we know what
I use every day.
Well, probably are words you and I use every day, but the average listener is not using these words every day. So when JP2 talks about original solitude, he bases it on it's not good for the man to be alone, and we immediately jump to, okay, the male without the female, but he zooms in on the fact that that word man is Adam with a small a, not capital A, the name of the male, but Adam, generically the human person. And so this solitude is an experience of every human person, and it's the fact that we are alone in the world, in the visible world, as persons. No other creature is a person. And Adam realizes this when he names the animals. He sees all these other bodies. He has a body. His body's similar to a lot of the animal bodies he's naming, but none of these bodies express an interior mystery. As JP2 says, it's nonsense to talk about the interior life of a squirrel, right? An animal.
Those big, beautiful eyes of the cow that are basically vacant.
Exactly. So here's one way into the interior. I once heard it said, and I believe it's true, and whenever I share this with an audience, there's just like yes, I know that's true. Behind the eyes of every person you meet, person is the key word here, not a cow, but behind the eyes of every person you meet is a story that if you knew it, you would weep.
I love that.
That's we all know that's true.
Yeah.
And that's putting that statement is putting its finger on what JP2 means by original solitude. You're not going to see this in the animals. We're alone in the world as persons, right? Subjectivity means we have the ability to act. We are not only acted upon, right? If you get hit by a truck, you're being acted upon. But the guy driving the truck, if he sees you and hits the gas because he wants to hit you, that's an action that comes from his own subjectivity, from his own freedom, from his own. It's not a good choice of his freedom to run you over with his truck. But just for the sake of example, I'm saying, let's put it this way. Chickens do not look up at the stars and wonder what's out there. Right? Chickens do not come to courses like the one you're teaching this week to reflect on what does it mean to be a chicken. Right? Chickens do not build cathedrals or skyscrapers. And as I often say, nor do chickens get into airplanes and fly them into skyscrapers. Right? So we have this thing called freedom, subjectivity, personhood, this interior mysteries of solitude. We're different from the animals. It comes down to this one word, freedom. And then I'll often say, in the words of the prophet William Wallace, what will you do with your freedom? Right? Will you fight? Right? Are we going to use our freedom to fight for the true, the good, and the beautiful? And could we not say that spiritual direction is really directing the person to get in touch with that mystery of his or her interior world, which an animal doesn't have, a mere animal doesn't have, to examine, how am I using my freedom? Where have others used their freedom wrongly towards me? How has this wounded me? How has this crippled me from flourishing as a person, flourishing in my relationship? And I think key word here is relationship, because the purpose of solitude is to get us in touch with our call to relationship. And when we have freedom precisely as the capacity to enter into loving relationship. And this is where the wound is. When we use our freedom wrongly, we're wounding one another, and then we're actually crippled in our ability to enter lovingly and healthily into relationship. And this is the stuff that gets unearthed, right? As I look back at nearly 20 years of seeing the same spiritual director, I would say I've been on an archaeological dig with him into areas of my life where I was crippled in being authentically human. And I was compelled to do that archaeological dig precisely because of my relationship with my wife, Wendy, and seeing the ways that despite my best attempts to love her, I was actually hurting her in all kinds of ways. And her pain was like a mirror that I had to look in and say, okay, why, despite my best efforts to love this other person, have I wounded her? I have to look at where this comes from in my own life. What lies did I believe? Where was I malformed? Where was I not properly flourishing as a human being, and why? And spiritual direction has been the journey that has enabled me to discover those places in my own life where experiences wounded me, other people using their freedom wrongly in my life, wounding me. And in those wounds, I became crippled and not able to love rightly. But in realizing through spiritual direction that back to this idea of a presence that knows me and loves me in those places where I'm crippled, where I'm blind, where I'm deaf, where my hand is withered, and I'm just drawing from all the stories of the people in the Gospels who get healed, right? Or the woman with the bleeding hemorrhage. We all have these interior bleeding places. We all have withered hands. We're all deaf. We're all blind. And I love this line from Pope Benedict XVI. He says, when Jesus places his fingers in that man's ears, that deaf man's ears, and groans, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Ephatha, be opened. Pope Benedict says this takes us to the very essence of Jesus' mission, that we would be opened. That in a nutshell is what nearly 20 years of spiritual direction has taught me, to be opened.
And it happens through the relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what I have to emphasize over and over again, because people often have the idea that the spiritual director just has a bunch of answers. Like, you're going to come and you're going to say some things, and then he's going to say, oh, your interior consists of this and this and this, do this thing and that thing and the other thing. But it's the relationship itself. It's a particular kind of relationship because the focus of the relationship is on your relationship with God, the directee's relationship with God. So the spiritual director in that way enters into a place, a kind of sacramental place where he is closely associated with your relationship with God. So the things that you can open up in spiritual direction are things that you can also open up with God. And they're places in the heart that are then being exposed, and your spiritual director is helping you to anticipate and enter into the kinds of responses of love and mercy that God himself gives us. And so that interior journey, as you described, opens up through a relationship.